Thank you, Alan. In many ways, it would have been great if we could have put Alan's presentation and perhaps what I'm about to give you much, much earlier in the day. But things are as they are. So, fit for the future, governance and member voice. What I want to share with you is some of the discussions that the board have been having over the past 6 months about how our current arrangements for governance and hearing the voice of members can be made more effective. And I think one of the big things out of today is how do we get those communications right. Now, the need for change has been made more evident over recent weeks through a number of u3as suggesting that board members, all of whom are members of u3as, are out of touch with the membership. We're members, but we're out of touch with the membership, apparently. We've been considering what changes might be appropriate to ensure that we've got a board which meets the current and very challenging charity and company law requirements, and a structure which ensures that u3as who comprise our membership are involved in and consulted on those developments that affect u3as and the ways in which the u3a movement might develop in the future. The ideas that we're currently developing are not new. As long ago as 1998, a working party of the National Executive Committee, as it was then known, recognised that as the movement grew, there was a danger of a widening gap between local u3as and those charged with handling the governance of the movement. So 25 years ago, people were recognising what we've witnessed today. It was recognised that the Board of Trustees must have the expertise, skills and commitment to carry out their duties and to command the respect of members. The primary responsibility of the board then, as now, was to ensure that the management and coordination of the movement meets the standards laid down by the charity commissioners and that all activities are legal and support the objects of the trust. That working party also recognised the need for a structure that enabled u3as to be involved in the decision-making processes of the governing body. In order to achieve this, the establishment of a national council was proposed, which would encourage better communications, would involve a greater number of members, and would be responsible for developing a forward plan, reviewed annually for the development of the movement. For whatever reason, it would appear that these changes were not put before an AGM, though the paper referring to them is headed "A Preview of the Changes to be Proposed at the 1988 AGM." But there's nothing in the minutes of that AGM to suggest that they actually were considered there. But during the following years, there were ongoing discussions culminating in the establishment of the current governance arrangements in 2008. In 2016, the question as to whether the governance structure required changes was further discussed, and I guess there's quite a number of people in this room will have recollections of that. That resulted in some changes to the Articles of Association, but no other significant changes to the board and committee structure that we have today. And the governance review that was undertaken in 2020 also recognised a need for a radical overhaul. It's worth noting that in 1998 there were 65,000 members in 350 local u3as. In 2008 there were 207,000 members in 698 local u3as. And it's perhaps hardly surprising that a movement of 388,000 members in over 1,000 u3as should find it necessary to review its structural and governance arrangements. Having set out the background, I'll now focus on why the board considers changes necessary and outline the kind of ideas that we're thinking about and will be looking for an opportunity to discuss in the coming months. If change is to happen, it needs to be supported by u3as, and we need to work together to work out the best way of achieving it. There will be limited time for some discussion at the end of this presentation, but this is the beginning of a conversation. During the coming months, there will be consultations arranged in each of the regions and nations, as well as through the networks. And these consultations will lead to a set of firm proposals for consideration, hopefully in the coming year. There's also a dedicated email address, governance@u3a.org.uk, for comments, suggestions and questions. A question in everybody's mind, especially after the AGM discussion, is that of cost. As yet, while we're dealing with a concept rather than a firm proposal, there has not been a complete costing of what I'm talking about today. But the intention is that the changes we're exploring should involve no additional costs once established, though there will be costs such as legal advice incurred in a transition. So as you will see on the slide, there are a number of reasons why the board considers change is necessary now. And I would add to those listed the reality of the experience of the past couple of months, where it's become abundantly clear that some members have identified a breakdown in communication between themselves, their elected representatives and the u3a Trust. It's important to note that we're not the only voluntary organisation to face similar challenges. Other federated organisations with similar structures to the Third Age Trust have made changes to their governance structures, and these changes have been welcomed in general by the membership once implemented, though I do know that some of those organisations found it fairly difficult to take the pathway that led them to the changes which they're now finding beneficial. The key changes the board is exploring are shown on the slide. But before I go on to explore these in more detail, I'd like to invite two of our long-serving trustees to say a little about why they view the need for us to be exploring change.
Hi. So when this proposal was first suggested, I was a bit unsure about it. When a similar idea was discussed in 2016, at that time I spoke to someone who had been a trustee when the current system was agreed. He was concerned that the council would just be a talking shop and that the link with the regions would be lost. However, I soon began to feel that this was a sensible proposal. Firstly, because this time there's considerable clarity about the role of both the council and the board and the purpose of both. Secondly, because after being a trustee for 4 years, I have come to feel that the current situation is untenable. The number of u3as has almost doubled since 2008, and with that comes far more work for the trustee to deal with in terms of general queries and specific issues. In 2008 in the East Midlands, there was just one regional meeting. But soon after that, networks were established, and there are now 7 in my region that each meet several times a year. I have tried to attend them all, and have to say that moving to virtual meetings during COVID was actually quite helpful. But now meetings are usually face-to-face again, with the travel and extra time involved. The role can feel like being back at work, with the accompanying stress and pressure, which is really not what any of us want when we're retired. So I feel that for a council member to have less responsibility for the governance and finances of the trust, which increasingly require a considerable level of expertise, and to be able to focus on their region or devolved nation and on the future policy of the trust would actually be of great benefit. Those of us who are elected to the board bring with us a wealth of expertise developed from our experiences and our own u3as, working as trust volunteers and being involved with networks. We have a good understanding of the u3a movement and the support that u3as tend to need. However, most of us do not have the financial and legal knowledge that increasingly is needed to be on the board of a large charity. In my region, up to this AGM, no one had put themselves forward as my successor. That confirms my view that the role has become too large and unwieldy, and that members are not willing to give up so much time. I hope that if this new arrangement does come about, there will be far more interest in becoming a member of the council and in having the opportunity to influence the future direction of our wonderful movement.
Right. Sorry. I have been elected trustee for Northern Ireland since August 2019. It was unfortunate that lockdown due to the pandemic in March 2020 happened, and the role changed somewhat from what I expected and envisaged. I have now completed 3 years, and in the last year being close to normality. I have found this time to be busy, an interesting learning experience, and diverse and demanding role which requires a considerable amount of commitment, which at times can feel overwhelming due to the different aspects of the role. When I was first introduced to the idea of separating the board and creating a council for regional members, the exact name to be decided, I was quite surprised and confused about the whole concept. I did, however, give proposals a considerable amount of thought and became quite sceptical and opposed to the ideas. I didn't see the need for change, and I felt that if expertise was necessary to meet the Charity Commission's requirements, then this expertise should be co-opted to the board as and when necessary. I did express these views at a board meeting in May. So what happened to change my mind? At a session prior to the board meeting, the trustees were engaged in an exercise to break down the various elements of the trustee's role and write these on post-its. These were then placed on a board under sections showing the different elements of the role. 2 of the sections were overloaded with stickers, the governance and the regional membership services. It was clear to see the clash of priorities which made this role so difficult to manage and showed how diverse the role is. When giving all your attention to the board matters, which we understand should get priority, the regional matters must be delayed or postponed, and you are left feeling with the frustration of being pulled in different directions without much job satisfaction. I could therefore understand the justification of separating the 2 elements of the role, with the board concentrating on governance, finance and legal aspects, and the elected council members would then devote their time to support teams, the regional groups, the volunteers and the networks. This regional work experience will then feed into the board via the council members. I think it is essential, however, that there are close and strong working ties and communication links between the 2 entities to enable this new way of working to succeed. I became convinced that aspects of the board's responsibilities would be better met by a smaller but expertly concentrated core, and the members' needs met by the members' needs and expectations met by the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean, and thank you, Valerie. So, having heard the voice of some of the trustees and how their perspectives have changed over the past months, let's take a look at what the board is looking at by way of change. And I want to emphasise that at the moment this is conceptual. This is not something which we're bringing to the movement at the moment and saying, please vote and decide that you want this or not. This is an idea that we're still framing and needing assistance with. But the main change is the establishment of a u3a council. Although I've referred to previous recommendations to establish a council, it was not always clear what the role of such a council would be, and there were concerns expressed that it would reduce the voice of members. Underlying the current change that we're looking at is the creation of a body enabling the effective voice of membership in determining the development of the movement-wide planning and activities, while at the same time recognising that decision-making on compliance issues is better taken on a board with specialist knowledge. The aim is to enable rather than constrain the member voice and input into the future development of our movement. We've got tentative thoughts on how the relationship between the council and the board would operate, and the election arrangements for the members of each body. The intention would be that all council members and all board members would be elected from the u3a membership. We do know that there are other organisations which advertise for their trustees on, as it were, the open market, but that is not something that we are contemplating in any way, as it would seem totally inappropriate. And frankly, we view the u3a movement having sufficient people with specific skills to be able to fulfil our needs. It's just tailoring what we're asking people to do in a more appropriate way, so the skills are appropriately used, and there's that a more structured rather than the open-ended commitment that is required at the moment of most of the board members. As two of my colleagues have said, it's become more or less untenable what they're being asked to do. But people are still doing it. The current board approved the concept of the creation of a u3a council and u3a board at its July meeting. So the current board, as of before the AGM today, had said, yes, this is something we want to move towards. And some thought has begun to be given to a potential roadmap for the implementation of a new structure, with a view to bringing a formal proposal for revised articles of association to an EGM or an AGM in the near future, but we don't want to rush this job, we want to get it right. Our initial thinking was to, frankly, to try and get it done for an EGM next March, but we've been, I think, wisely advised that we need to make sure that we take time and get it right rather than rushing it. In the meantime, the current trustees and officers will be available to make presentations to the membership to answer questions. We welcome comments that will assist in refining the plans, and these should be sent to the email address, which it isn't there on that one, it's on a later slide, at governance.u3a.org.uk. So to summarise, what we're looking at is the establishment of a separate u3a council and board, and that will permit the elected regional representatives to focus on UK-wide developments, including work being undertaken by u3as in the regions and nations, and to continue to develop local support systems and communication networks. A smaller u3a board with u3a members elected by the membership on the basis of their expertise will ensure compliance to both the requirements of the Charity Commission and company law. That there will be clear channels of communication between u3a members and u3a council members. There will be clear protocols setting out the functions of the u3a board and the u3a council in order to ensure communication and sound functioning. As this presentation is the first time the board has shared its thinking about how we can create a more effective governance structure for the future, I recognise that those of you who are hearing this presentation will take some time to process the ideas that I'm presenting today. But if you have any initial comments or observations, it would be good to hear them. But I want to stress that this is the start of an ongoing conversation that will take place over the coming months. The slides and this script will be made available on the website, together with a link to the recording of this presentation. A further presentation will be made available shortly, with some more details of a possible way forward, together with details of opportunities for further discussions. So as I say, this is a beginning, not anything which is a fully formed package. But that is what we're looking at, it's what we're wanting to do, and that's what I wanted to share with you, because I hope that if we can manage to get this constructed properly and get the right communication channels built in, that we will be able to have a council that would have dealt with a lot of the stuff that we've dealt with this afternoon before it ever got to a decision-making point, because it would have been the member council that would have had an opportunity to pull it all apart and put it together, as so with other things, and that the board itself would be a much more focused body. I think that's all I want to say for now.